I said get out! This is a high-end shop, not a trash can!
Black single dad James Carter walked into his own auto shop near midnight, wearing a grease-stained shirt and holding his sleeping 8-year-old daughter. The new manager looked him up and down. "Sir, this is a place you cannot enter." 3 minutes later, that same manager enthusiastically rushed to greet a well-dressed white couple whose BMW had just been towed in. When James calmly asked to step into the service bay, he was publicly humiliated and escorted to the door. The mechanics around had no idea that the man being thrown out owned every single tool in that $800 auto shop. Before the night ends, someone will be fired on the spot. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, stay with us. This story is for you. The rain in Georgia that night wasn't just falling. It was hammering against the windshield of James Carter's 2004 Ford F-150. It was 11:45 p.m. James had been driving for 6 hours straight, making the long trek back from Alabama. He'd spent the past 3 months out of state settling his grandmother's estate and arranging her funeral. Next to him in the passenger seat, his 8-year-old daughter Lila was fast asleep. Her small hands gripped a worn-out stuffed bear she called Wrench. James was exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that settled deep into the bones and made your eyes burn. But the trip had gotten much worse 20 miles back. The truck's heater core had quit without warning. The cabin temperature plummeted. Lila began to shiver in her sleep, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. James couldn't let his little girl freeze. He did what any lifelong mechanic would do. He pulled over to the shoulder of the highway, grabbed his heavy metal toolbox from the bed, and slid right under the truck in the pouring rain. He managed to bypass the heater valve to get some warm air flowing into the cabin again, but the cost was steep. His thick canvas work jacket was soaked through with freezing rain. His jeans were caked in thick highway mud. His hands and forearms were smeared with black engine grease. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with the sharp metallic scent of motor oil. He looked like a man who had lost a fight with a dirt road. But they were back in town. James hadn't planned on stopping at work tonight. He just wanted a hot shower and a real bed. But as he drove past the familiar intersection, he looked up at the large neon sign of his shop. Carter's Auto. Except the letter C was dark. That bothered him. James wasn't just a mechanic. He was the owner. He had built this place with his own 2 hands. Seeing a burnt-out letter on his main sign was a massive red flag. It was a clear indicator that standards had slipped while he was away. He decided to pull into the lot, just for a minute. He wanted to get Lila out of the drafty truck and into the warm waiting room while he checked in with the night shift. He knew Hank, his oldest and most reliable mechanic, would be working the floor tonight. James turned off the ignition. The engine ticked as it cooled. He scooped Lila into his arms, careful not to wake her. She rested her head on his shoulder. He carried her through the rain, his boots splashing in the puddles toward the glowing glass doors of the front lobby. He pushed the heavy glass door open, stepping out of the storm and into the light. But what James didn't know was that the real problem waiting for him wasn't a broken neon sign. The moment the glass doors slid shut behind him, the roaring sound of the rain vanished. It was replaced by the soft hum of central air conditioning and light jazz music playing from hidden ceiling speakers. James stopped in his tracks. He blinked. The lobby didn't look like his lobby. During his 3 months away, he had authorized a corporate agency to bring in a temporary management team. They were supposed to handle daily operations and do some light remodeling. He just hadn't expected it to look like the waiting room of a luxury dealership. The worn leather chairs he bought 5 years ago were gone. In their place sat sleek, modern white sofas. The old coffee machine was now a high-end espresso bar. And the floor was covered in polished, spotless white porcelain tiles. James looked down. His heavy steel-toe boots, dripping with highway mud and oil, had already left 3 massive black footprints on the pristine tile. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp. It didn't belong to a mechanic. James looked up toward the reception desk. Standing there was a man who looked out of place in a repair shop. He was young, maybe 28. He wore a tailored navy suit and a tight silk tie, not a speck of dust on him. His name tag read Derek Walsh, General Manager. Derek was staring down at James's boots. His lips curled back in a look of absolute disgust. "You are tracking mud everywhere," Derek said. The tone dripped with condescension. James took a slow breath. He felt the familiar sting of being judged by his cover. He looked down at his own grease-stained hands. For a brief second, his mind flashed back 32 years. He was 10 years old, standing in this exact same spot. Back then, this building was nothing more than a failing $800 garage with a leaking roof and concrete floors. His father, Earl Carter, had knelt down, wiping a smear of oil from his own face. "Never judge a man by the grease on his hands," son Earl had told him. Look at what those hands have built. Those hands had built Carter's Auto into the most successful independent shop in the county. James had 3 locations now. He employed 45 people. But looking at Derek, James realized the new manager didn't see a successful businessman. He saw a filthy, exhausted laborer who didn't belong. James adjusted Lila in his arms. She whimpered softly in her sleep. He didn't want to cause a scene. He didn't want to wake his daughter. He just wanted to find Hank and see how the service bays were running. "I just need to step through to the back," James said. His voice was calm and steady. "I'm looking for Hank." Derek adjusted his silk tie. He stood a little taller, puffing out his chest behind the polished counter. He looked James up and down one more time. Then he delivered the coldest, most dismissive greeting James had ever heard. "Sir, I don't care who you are looking for. This waiting area is for paying customers only." Derek leaned over the pristine reception counter. He didn't just speak. He projected his voice, so the 2 junior receptionists standing nearby could hear every single word. "Sir, I need you to leave," Derek said. "This waiting area is not a homeless shelter." The harshness of his voice echoed in the quiet lobby. It cut right through the soft jazz music playing from the ceiling. Lila stirred against James's shoulder. She whimpered softly, her small fingers clutching the collar of his wet canvas jacket. She was cold. She was tired. And now she was scared by the sudden loud noise. Derek pointed a manicured finger toward the glass exit. "You need to step outside right now. I am not letting you track any more of that filth into my service bays." "My service bays?" James felt a hot, sharp spike of anger hit his chest. He had paid for every square inch of concrete in those bays. He had installed the hydraulic lifts himself, working late into the night until his back screamed in pain. He knew the name of every tool in the back room because he had bought them all. He looked down at his daughter. She was shivering in his arms, hiding her face from the bright overhead lights. James made a choice. He chose to be a gentle father instead of a furious boss. He swallowed his pride. He accepted the public humiliation right in front of his own new employees. James slowly turned around. He prepared to carry Lila back out into the freezing rain and wait under the outdoor metal awning. Down by his side, his free hand curled into a fist. He squeezed so tight his knuckles turned bone white. The veins in his forearm popped against the thick grease, but his other hand, it patted his daughter's back in a slow, steady, soothing rhythm. He was about to walk out into the cold, but then the automatic glass doors slid open again. A rush of freezing wind blew into the lobby. A white couple walked in. They were in their late 40s, dressed in expensive designer coats that looked fresh off a mannequin. Behind them, through the rain-streaked glass, James could see a flatbed tow truck unloading a sleek silver BMW. The man shook his expensive umbrella. Water dripped heavily directly onto the pristine porcelain tiles, creating a large, messy puddle right in the center of the room. Derek didn't frown. He didn't point his finger toward the door. Instead, the manager's posture transformed instantly. The condescending scowl vanished, replaced by a bright, eager, practiced smile. Derek practically sprinted out from behind the counter to greet them. "Welcome to Carter's Auto," Derek beamed, offering his hand. "How can we help you tonight?" "We hit a massive pothole on the interstate," the man said, sounding deeply annoyed. "The car is making a terrible noise from the undercarriage. We don't have an appointment, but we need this fixed now." "Not a problem at all, sir," Derek assured them. His voice dripped with forced sweetness. "I will have my lead technician look at it right this second. Please make yourselves comfortable by the espresso bar." James stopped near the exit. He stood in the shadows of the doorway, quietly observing this two-faced behavior. He watched the water pooling from the VIP umbrella. Then, he looked at the mud from his own steel-toe boots. The contrast was glaring. James realized something sickening. The culture of respect his father had built, the absolute rule that every broken-down driver gets treated with dignity, was being destroyed. This shiny new manager was tearing it down. He was replacing 50 years of community trust with a shallow caste system based on what kind of clothes a person wore. Suddenly, a loud, rhythmic knocking noise echoed from the back shop. Tack, tack, tack. The wealthy customer winced aggressively, rubbing his temples. Good Lord, what is that awful racket? Derek let out a soft, apologetic laugh. He leaned in close to the couple, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I am so sorry about the noise. We just have some drifters who keep bothering us lately. As Derek said the word drifters, he shot a sideways, piercing glare directly at James. James felt his jaw tighten. This wasn't the auto shop his father envisioned. He couldn't accept this injustice, not in his own house. James turned away from the exit. He walked right back to the reception desk, his heavy boots thudding loudly against the tile. He cut right through Derek's sycophantic display, stepping directly between the manager and the wealthy couple. The VIP customer recoiled instantly. He pulled his wife back with a sneer, aggressively brushing his sleeve as if the mere air around James's greasy jacket might infect them with poverty. James ignored them entirely. He kept his eyes locked dead on Derek. He didn't drop his title. He didn't scream that he owned the place. He remained dead calm. I need to speak to Tommy or Hank, James said. His voice was low, carrying a heavy weight that demanded attention. I need to talk to them about a vehicle. He refused to take another step back. His physical presence was a boulder blocking Derek's shiny, polished path. Derek lost his patience completely. His face flushed bright red with anger. The fake customer service smile dropped, revealing pure venom underneath. I warned you, Derek snapped. The manager reached down to his belt. He ripped his two-way radio from its holster. He pressed the transmit button with aggressive force. A burst of harsh, screeching static pierced the quiet lobby, making Leela jump in James's arms. James glanced up at the digital clock on the wall. It was exactly 11:52 p.m. Tommy. Get out to the front lobby right now, Derek barked into the radio. We have a vagrant refusing to leave. Come throw him out. Derek clipped the radio back to his belt with a sharp click. He crossed his arms, looking at James with a smug, victorious grin. The arrogant manager had absolutely no idea. He had no idea that the man he was about to call out from the garage was the very person who could flip this entire board upside down. What Derek did next would be the most expensive mistake of his career. The heavy metal fire door separating the lobby from the service bays swung open with a loud bang. A young mechanic stepped out into the pristine reception area. He was 25 years old, wearing a spotless blue uniform with Tommy Shift lead stitched over the chest pocket. Tommy wiped his hands hard with a red shop rag, looking visibly annoyed by Derek's radio call. For the past 3 hours, Tommy had been going crazy trying to diagnose a persistent, mysterious knocking noise on a late-model truck parked in Bay 4. He was frustrated, exhausted, and looking for someone to take his anger out on. Tommy had only been working at Carter's Auto for 2 short months. He was hired by the temporary corporate agency while James was away in Alabama. He had no idea what the real CEO of the company looked like. "What's the massive emergency, Derek?" Tommy asked, glaring at James. "This vagrant refuses to leave," Derek sneered, adjusting his silk tie with a huff. "He's tracking thick mud all over my brand new floors. Get him out of here before he scares off our actual paying customers." Tommy looked James up and down. He took in the mud-caked jeans, the grease-stained canvas jacket, and the worn-out steel-toe boots. He let out a loud, mocking laugh that echoed in the lobby. "Listen, old man," Tommy scoffed, pointing his dirty rag at the exit door. "You need to take your kid and get out of here right now before things get ugly." James didn't flinch. He ignored the blatant insult. Instead, he tilted his head toward the open service doors. The rhythmic, metallic knocking noise, tack, 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 was echoing loud and clear from Bay 4 into the lobby. "You're looking in the wrong place," James said in a calm voice. "That noise isn't a collapsed lifter. It's a loose timing chain tensioner. If you keep revving the engine like that, you're going to bend the valves and blow the entire engine block." Tommy stopped wiping his hands. A look of sheer disbelief washed over his face, followed fast by arrogant, defensive rage. "Are you kidding me right now?" Tommy laughed right in James's face. What does a guy driving a junk truck know about modern engines? Do I look like I need mechanical advice from a homeless guy who can't even afford a hot shower? I am the lead technician here. Get out. James felt a deep, sickening realization settle in his gut. They weren't just disrespecting him based on his clothes. They were arrogant, incompetent, and destroying the elite repair reputation his father had built for this shop. Derek had seen enough of this defiance. The manager pulled a sleek, expensive smartphone from his tailored suit pocket. That's it. I'm not dealing with this trash anymore, Derek declared. He jabbed the glass screen, dialing the county sheriff's dispatch. Yes, hello. We need an officer at Carter's Auto right now. We have a hostile vagrant harassing our staff and refusing to leave the premises. The word hostile hung heavy in the tense air. The sudden escalation combined with Tommy's loud yelling broke Lila's sleep. The 8-year-old girl woke up wide awake. She rubbed her tired eyes looking around the bright, unfamiliar hostel lobby. Then she looked up at her father's face. Daddy, Lila whispered, her tiny voice trembling with fear. Why won't they let us stay inside from the rain? Did we do something wrong? That single innocent question pierced James's heart much harder than any arrogant insult Derek or Tommy had thrown at him. James faced a critical split-second decision. He was a successful businessman. He was a proud black man living in suburban Georgia. But above all else, he was a father. He refused to let his young daughter witness a screaming match, and he did not want her terrified by a tense confrontation with law enforcement inside his own business. He chose to protect his daughter's innocence over his own bruised ego. No, baby. We didn't do anything wrong, James whispered, tucking her head securely under his chin. We're just going to step outside for a minute. James took a slow step backward. He retreated. He walked out the heavy glass doors, carrying Lila back into the freezing cold night. He stood under the outdoor metal awning, using his broad shoulders to shield his daughter from the biting wind. Through the large glass windows, he could see the VIP couple pointing at him, whispering to Derek with disgusted looks on their faces. The public humiliation was complete. Minutes ticked by slow. The cold rain blew sideways under the small awning. Then the bright red and blue flashing lights of a patrol car cut through the dark, rainy night. The cruiser pulled hard into the parking lot, its high beams illuminating the deep puddles swirling around James's boots. The police were 60 seconds away, but James wasn't planning on moving a single inch. The patrol cruiser parked at a sharp angle near the entrance. A county sheriff's deputy stepped out into the heavy rain. His hand rested by habit on his heavy leather duty belt, his posture alert and tense. Inside the warm, bright lobby, Derek stood safely behind the glass, pointing a victorious finger straight at James. The manager looked smug, enjoying the massive power trip of having a vagrant handled by law enforcement. The rain began falling much harder. A sharp gust of icy wind swept viciously under the awning. James didn't hesitate for a second. He stripped off his heavy, grease-stained canvas work jacket. He wrapped the thick fabric tight around Lila's small shoulders to keep her warm, exposing himself to the freezing rain. His thin cotton undershirt was soaked in seconds. The deputy approached him with caution, his boots splashing in the puddles. "Evening, sir," the deputy said, his tone firm and full of authority. "I've got a call from the manager inside saying you're trespassing and causing a disturbance. I'm going to need to see your ID." It was a tense, humiliating situation. Being questioned as a suspect on the very property he owned, standing on the concrete he had paid to pour. But James didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice in righteous anger. He didn't make any sudden movements or create extra drama with the officer. He remained stone calm, showing the absolute discipline of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he had built. "Of course, Officer," James said, his voice unwavering. Using one strong arm to keep Lila secure against his chest, James reached into his back pocket. He pulled out his worn leather wallet. As he opened it, a heavy drop of freezing rain hit the back of his neck. He felt the intense cold seep into his bones, but his mind flashed back to the most important lesson of his entire life. Never judge a man by the grease on his hands. Look at what those hands have built. James handed his driver's license over to the deputy. The officer clicked on a bright tactical flashlight, shining the harsh, blinding beam straight onto the plastic card, squinting to read the small text in the pouring rain. But before the deputy could even read the first name, a loud, gravelly voice echoed across the flooded parking lot. It came from the heavy side door of the service garage. The heavy side door of the service garage squeaked loud on its rusty iron hinges. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out under the dim yellow exterior floodlights. It was Hank. At 62 years old, Hank was the undisputed backbone of Carter's Auto. He was the veteran lead mechanic, a man whose large hands were forever stained with the same deep black grease as James's. Hank had worked at this very shop since James's father, Earl Carter, had poured the original concrete foundation decades ago. He was a master of his craft, respected by everyone in the county. Hank stood under the small metal overhang, wiping dark motor oil from his massive forearms with a rag. He looked visibly annoyed by the bright flashing police lights illuminating the flooded parking lot. "What in the world is going on out here?" Hank yelled over the heavy driving rain, his gravelly voice cutting sharp through the noise of the storm. Inside the warm, bright lobby, Derek tapped hard on the glass door to get the old mechanic's attention. The manager pointed a smug, victorious finger toward James and the police officer. "Don't worry about it, Hank," Derek shouted through the cracked door. "I'm just having the police take out the trash. Some hostile vagrant came in here, causing a massive scene." Hank squinted through the pouring rain. From his angle by the garage, the man standing with the deputy was just a dark silhouette. He saw a tall man wearing a soaked cotton undershirt, holding a small child, wrapped tight in a muddy canvas jacket. The darkness and the blinding sideways rain hid James's face. "Get back to work, Hank. The police have it handled," Derek ordered, enjoying his moment of absolute authority over the shop. Out in the freezing rain, the sheriff's deputy clicked his tactical flashlight up to its highest setting. The blinding white beam hit James straight in the face, illuminating his strong jawline, his calm, focused eyes, and the deep exhaustion etched into his features. From 30 feet away, Hank saw the face illuminated in the bright beam. The heavy, solid steel wrench Hank had been holding slipped from his fingers. It hit the cold, wet concrete floor with a loud, ringing clang that echoed across the quiet street. Hank didn't hesitate for a single second. The veteran mechanic sprinted out into the torrential rain, ignoring his own safety and the freezing cold. His thick silver hair was soaked in seconds by the downpour. He bypassed the confused deputy. He threw his massive, muscular arms around the soaking wet vagrant, hugging James in a tight, fierce, brotherly embrace. Derek, Tommy, and the deputy froze, standing like statues in absolute paralyzing shock. And then Hank pulled back, looked straight at the manager behind the glass, and said the words that made Derek's blood run ice cold. "Are you out of your nines?" Hank roared. The veteran mechanic's voice shook with raw, unrestrained fury as he glared straight at the sheriff's deputy, then pointed a heavy, calloused finger straight at the glass lobby doors. "You're trespassing, and this is James Carter. He owns this entire damn property." The deputy flinched hard. He lowered his blinding tactical flashlight. He looked down at the soaked plastic driver's license resting in his hand. He read the name printed bold in black letters, James Earl Carter. It was the exact same name listed on the massive legal business license hanging right behind the front reception desk. "Oh God," the deputy muttered under his breath. He switched off his flashlight. His entire strict authoritative posture vanished into thin air. "Mr. Carter." "Sir, I am so sorry," the manager inside told dispatch. "It's fine, officer," James said, his voice remaining stone calm despite the freezing rain beating against his back. "You were just doing your job." Inside the bright lobby, the entire atmosphere shifted with breakneck speed. The smug, victorious smile on Derek's face melted away in a flash. The arrogant manager stood frozen in terror. His meticulously manicured hands began to shake without control. Cold sweat beaded on his pale forehead, despite the lobby's perfectly controlled air conditioning. Behind Derek, the wealthy VIP couple who had complained about James's muddy appearance realized exactly what they had done. Their faces flushed bright red with deep, burning embarrassment. The husband awkwardly grabbed his wife's arm and they shuffled backward, trying hard to disappear into the background. Tommy, the young, arrogant shift lead, looked sick to his stomach. He had just mocked and threatened the CEO of the company. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had shattered. The audience might have expected James to storm into the lobby. They might have expected him to scream at Derek, to demand an apology, or to fire the manager in front of everyone. But James didn't do any of that. James didn't need to yell to show who was the boss. The garage was his kingdom. James handed his shivering daughter Lila over to Hank. The old mechanic wrapped his own thick, dry work jacket around the freezing little girl. Without saying a single word to the terrified manager behind the glass, James walked past the lobby doors. He bypassed the reception area. He walked straight through the heavy side door and stepped onto the oil-stained concrete floor of the service bays. He was heading straight for Bay 4, where the broken truck was still idling, knocking loud in the tense silence. The massive service area was cavernous, smelling rich of motor oil, chemical degreaser, and exhaust fumes. The entire space was dead quiet, except for the harsh, rhythmic metal knocking sound echoing loud from the late-model truck parked in Bay 4. Tuck, 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 tuck. Tommy and 3 other young, inexperienced mechanics had been gathered around the open hood for 3 agonizing hours. An expensive state-of-the-art OBD diagnostic scanner was plugged tight into the truck's computer. The bright digital screen only showed a generic cylinder 3 misfire code. Tommy, sweating hard in his clean blue uniform, had been desperate. Just before he walked out to confront James, Tommy had been preparing to tear off the entire top half of the engine, a massive, expensive, and useless repair. James stepped into the bright bay, his thin cotton undershirt still soaking wet and clinging to his chest from the freezing rain. Tommy scrambled in behind him, his face pale with fear. "Mr. Carter, sir, the computer says it's a misfire. We were just about to pull the cylinder head to check the lifters." James didn't look at Tommy. He didn't look at the expensive diagnostic computer. He reached out with his large, grease-stained hands and pushed the rolling computer cart out of the way. "Start it up," James commanded. His voice was low, authoritative, and carried the heavy weight of a true master craftsman. A terrified young mechanic jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The massive engine roared to life, and the heavy metallic knocking sound returned, vibrating hard through the concrete floor. James didn't grab a shiny tool. He didn't look at a digital screen. Instead, he leaned over the hot, vibrating engine block. He closed his eyes. He placed his thick, calloused, bare hands straight onto the hot metal valve cover, feeling the deep physical vibrations of the steel pistons firing inside. He turned his head sideways, bringing his ear just inches away from the fast-spinning serpentine belt. He tuned out the howling rain outside. He tuned out the heavy, nervous breathing of the terrified mechanics. He listened to the mechanical heartbeat of the machine. Tack, tack, tack. 30 seconds. That's all it took to solve a 3-hour mystery. James opened his eyes. He reached into his muddy jeans pocket and pulled out a simple, heavy metal wrench. He tapped the steel wrench hard against a very specific aluminum casing on the front right side of the engine block. "It's your timing chain tensioner on the bank 2 side," James said with absolute certainty. The plastic guide rail snapped in half. The heavy chain is slapping straight against the aluminum cover. It's not a collapsed lifter. It's not a misfire. Shut it down right now before it skips a tooth and destroys the valves. The pale mechanic killed the engine. Hank walked up behind James carrying a heavy-duty shop flashlight. The veteran mechanic shined the bright beam down into the narrow, dark gap James had just pointed to. "Well, I'll be damned," Hank muttered, a wide, proud smile breaking across his wrinkled face. "He's dead right. The tensioner guide is shattered to pieces. Good ear, boss." The young mechanics stood in stunned, absolute silence. Their mouths hung wide open. They had spent 3 frustrating hours relying on expensive computers only to watch a man in soaking wet, muddy clothes solve the complex problem in 30 seconds, using nothing but his bare hands and his ears. The massive, noisy garage fell into a deep, reverent silence. The only sound left in the room was James tossing his wrench onto the metal tool cart. The true king had returned to his throne. James wiped his greasy hands with a clean red shop rag. He turned slow, his piercing eyes locking onto Tommy. The young shift lead was shaking. The arrogant smirk he had worn just 10 minutes ago in the lobby had vanished, replaced by pale, sweaty fear. "Mr. Carter," Sir Tommy stammered, stepping backward. "I can explain. The OBD scanner, it was glitching. The computer threw a false misfire code. It's the equipment's fault, sir. I was just following the digital readout." James stopped wiping his hands. He tossed the red rag onto the heavy metal workbench. For a master mechanic, there was no greater sin than blaming your tools for your own incompetence. "A computer is just a tool," James said, his voice dead calm, carrying the heavy authority of a man who had built an empire with his bare hands. "It doesn't replace your eyes. It doesn't replace your experience. And it sure as hell doesn't replace your ears. Tommy swallowed hard, looking around the garage for any support. The other young mechanics just stared at their heavy boots. Hank stood by, his arms crossed over his massive chest, glaring at the boy. "You didn't just misdiagnose a simple repair," James continued, stepping closer. "You were arrogant. You insulted a customer based on how he looked. You were willing to tear a man's engine apart, costing him thousands of dollars just because you were too proud to listen to a man in dirty work clothes." James pointed a strong, calloused finger toward the heavy steel toolbox in the corner. "Carter's Auto doesn't need mechanics who lose their ears just because they bought a fancy electronic screen," James declared. "Pack your tools. You're done here." Tommy's face flushed deep red. He wanted to argue, but the intense, unyielding look in James's eyes silenced him in a flash. Defeated, the young man walked over to his bright red toolbox. Clack! The loud, sharp metal snap of the toolbox latch echoing through the quiet garage sounded like a judge's gavel falling. Tommy grabbed his heavy tool bag. Without saying another word, he walked out the heavy side door, stepping straight into the freezing, pouring rain. He had been fired by the very vagrant he had tried to throw out. Tommy was gone. But what James did next to the manager? Nobody saw that coming. The heavy silence in the garage shifted. Every mechanic, including Hank, turned their attention toward the large glass windows separating the shop from the lobby. Inside the bright reception area, Derek was already packing. The arrogant manager was shoving his expensive pens and arranged desk accessories into a cardboard box. His hands were shaking so hard he dropped his gold nameplate onto the floor. He knew it was over. He had called the police on the CEO. He had humiliated the owner of the company in front of VIP clients. Derek untied his expensive silk tie, pulling it from his neck like a noose. He took a deep breath, preparing to walk out into the freezing rain. But as Derek reached for the front door handle, James stepped back into the lobby. James didn't shout. He walked calm over to the chair where he had left his heavy, grease-stained canvas work jacket, the same muddy jacket he had wrapped around Lila to keep her warm. James picked up the heavy, filthy jacket. He walked over to the pristine, polished marble reception desk. He threw the dirty jacket right onto the clean surface. It landed with a heavy, wet thud. "Derek," James said. The manager flinched, turning around. "Mr. Carter, I am so sorry. I'll take my things and leave." "You can walk out that door right now, Derek. You can quit," James said, his dark eyes locking onto the terrified manager. "Or you can put this jacket on. Starting tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., you are no longer the front desk manager. You are a lube technician trainee. You're going to sweep the floors. You're going to drain hot oil. You're going to learn what it actually takes to get your hands dirty." Derek stared at the muddy jacket. The lobby was dead silent. "No more silk ties," James continued, his voice firm but empty of malice. "No more controlled air conditioning. No more looking down on the people who actually build this world. You learn the trade or you leave." It was the ultimate test. Would his pride win or his humility? Derek looked down at his soft, manicured hands. He thought about his high-paying salary, his expensive suits, and his massive ego. Then he looked at James, a man who had every right to destroy him, but was instead offering him a genuine, difficult path to redemption. Derek's manicured fingers trembled. Slow, he reached out and touched the rough, grease-stained fabric of the work jacket. He picked it up. He didn't say a word, but the tears welling in his eyes said everything. He had accepted the brutal, humbling second chance. With the internal matters handled, James turned his attention to the final piece of the puzzle. He picked up Lila, who was clutching her toy bear wrench, and walked over to the wealthy VIP couple standing stiff in the corner of the lobby. The husband and wife looked mortified. They had complained about James's smell. They had supported Derek calling the police. They were expecting to be thrown out into the storm. "Mr. Carter," the husband stammered, his face flushing deep crimson. He nervously pulled out his expensive smartphone. "We are embarrassed by our behavior tonight. I am so sorry. We'll call another tow truck and get our BMW out of your shop." The wife nodded fast, refusing to meet James's eyes out of pure shame. James raised a large, calloused hand, stopping the man from dialing. James didn't glare. He didn't boast. He didn't use his newfound power to humiliate them the way they had humiliated him. Instead, a genuine, warm, professional smile broke across his tired face. "There's no need for that, sir," James said. He turned his head toward the open garage doors. Hank grabbed the keys to the silver BMW on the flatbed. "Let's get it inside and see what's wrong with the suspension." The VIP couple looked up, shocked by the grace and total lack of vindictiveness. You're still going to fix our car?" the wife asked, her voice small and trembling. "At Carter's Auto, we fix every car that comes through those doors," James replied, his voice echoing with the quiet pride of a man who knew his true worth. "It doesn't matter what the car looks like, and it doesn't matter what the owner is wearing. We are mechanics. We solve problems." The suffocating tension in the air was replaced by absolute profound respect. The wealthy man in the expensive tailored suit reached out his hand. James reached out his own. The firm handshake between the two men was a powerful, striking image. One hand was soft, clean, and adorned with a heavy gold watch. The other was rough, calloused, and stained with permanent black grease. But in that moment, under the bright fluorescent lights of the lobby, those two hands were equal in dignity. Lila smiled bright, resting her head on her father's broad shoulder. Her daddy hadn't just fixed a broken engine tonight. He had fixed everything. 3 months later, the heavy summer rainstorms had long passed, replaced by the warm golden light of an early autumn morning streaming through the open bay doors of Carter's Auto. The garage was quiet, filled only with the soft, steady hum of the massive air compressors and the gentle clinking of tools. James stood in Bay 1, leaning over the exposed engine block of a classic Mustang. He wasn't alone. Standing on a sturdy wooden milk crate next to him was Lila. She was wearing her very own miniature pair of heavy canvas overalls, complete with a tiny name patch, embroidered with Junior Mechanic. James smiled, his strong, scarred hands guiding her small fingers as they gripped a heavy, rusted steel wrench. If you looked close, you could still see the faded initials E.C. carved into the metal handle, Elias Carter's wrench. "Now remember what I told you, sweetie," James murmured, his deep voice rumbling with pride. "You don't force the bolt, you listen to the metal, you feel the tension in the threads." Lila nodded with intense concentration. She pushed down on the heavy wrench with both hands. The stubborn bolt cracked loose with a satisfying pop. "I did it, Daddy, I felt it," she cheered, throwing her arms around his thick, oil-stained neck. James laughed out loud, a rich, joyful sound that echoed through the massive shop. "That's my girl. Grandpa would be so proud of you." "Morning, boss," a familiar voice called out. James turned. Walking across the polished concrete floor, carrying a cardboard tray filled with 3 steaming cups of black coffee, was Derek. He looked different. The expensive Italian silk tie and tailored suit were gone. Instead, Derek was wearing a standard blue mechanic's uniform. His name was stitched on the chest. His soft hands were now rough, calloused, and stained with a thin layer of engine grease that no amount of scrubbing could wash away. He didn't look like an arrogant rich executive anymore. He looked like a real mechanic, and for the first time in his life, he looked happy. "Coffee's hot, Mr. Carter," Derek said, setting the tray on a clean workbench. He smiled warm and handed a small cup of hot chocolate to Lila. "And 1 cocoa for the best junior tech in the shop." "Thank you, Derek," Lila beamed, taking the cup with both hands. Derek nodded, wiping a smudge of black grease from his forehead with the back of his hand. He looked at James, the respect between the two men silent but absolute. Derek had survived the grueling 3 months as a lube tech trainee. He had swallowed his massive pride, learned the trade from the bottom up, and discovered the quiet dignity of honest, hard labor. James took a sip of his black coffee, watching the golden morning sunlight catch the heavy steel of his father's old wrench. A man's worth isn't measured by the cleanliness of his shirt, but by the integrity of the work his hands produce. True respect isn't demanded from a corner office. It is earned down in the dirt, in the heat, and in the quiet moments when nobody else is watching. Sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the people we underestimate the most. If you were James that night, would you have fired the arrogant manager on the spot, or would you have given him a difficult second chance? Let us know what you would do in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of hidden talent and tough love, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more original stories.